So you've bought tickets to go see your favorite musical act. But surprise, at the very end of the process, you get hit with hidden high fees. Ticketing malfunctions and high fees in the ticketing industry were a hot topic in 2023, and PPI's Diana Moss joins the podcast to discuss the state of the ticket industry and what can be done to fix it. Diana is the vice president at PPI and director of competition policy, and she joins the podcast to talk about the ticketing industry, TicketMaster's monopoly, and more. We talk about how TicketMaster and Live Nation exert monopoly power in the ticketing industry, how they campaign to shift the blame from primary markets to secondary markets, the actions that we need to rein them in, and what a more competitive market for ticketing services would look like. As always, we appreciate whenever you like the podcast, subscribe, comment, rate us. All of those things are appreciated. If you really enjoy the podcast, we would appreciate your support at patreon.com/newliberalpodcast. Supporting us on Patreon means you get access to bonus episodes, our Sticker of the Month Club, our community Slack, and much more. You can also support us by becoming a member of the Center for New Liberalism at cnliberalism.org/become-a-member. As always, thank you for listening and enjoy the episode. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the New Liberal Podcast, part of the Center for New Liberalism. I'm your host, Jeremiah Johnson, and joining us this episode is Diana Moss. Diana, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeremiah. It's great to be here.
All right, so there's been a lot of talk about tickets in the last year. We can blame some of this on Taylor Swift, as people like to blame Taylor Swift for a lot of different things. You know, I think that's her role in the culture now, is just to be a lightning rod for everyone else's issues. But ticketing for the Taylor Swift Eras tour was predictably a disaster. There were some technical glitches and people got really mad about it. And people also started to discover that, hey, there's a lot of potential issues with the way we do tickets in this country and with the companies that are in charge of it. And we're not really happy with it. We're not really happy with the situation as it stands. So before we jump into, there's a lot of bills that people have proposed to, talk about the ticketing industry. There's a lot of action at both the state level and the national level. Can we do a high level overview of what is the actual state of ticketing in America? And the name that always comes up here is TicketMaster. So what do we know about TicketMaster as an entity, and what do we know about the ticketing market?
Sure. Yeah. So this is really an American monopoly story, what we see in the ticketing markets, Jeremiah, and it really goes back to the original merger between Live Nation and TicketMaster, which put together a ticketing provider with a concert promoter, artist management services, venue management. So just a fully integrated supply chain, if you will, that blankets the ticketing industry. And so TicketMaster is...
Would you have considered this like a vertical monopoly or a horizontal? I'm getting these terms mixed up, like vertical versus horizontal. But one of them is where you can combine the different stages of production, right?
Correct. You're absolutely right. This was a vertical merger that linked up markets in, you can call them adjacent markets, that flow into each other, with products and services that really encompass everything from the artists and the teams themselves trying to sell tickets to their events and venues all the way down to the fans or the consumers. So yeah, it was a massive vertical merger. And even before the merger.
And when did that take place? Just sorry, I'm peppering you with questions here, but when was that happening? When did the merger happen?
No worries. That was in 2010. And that merger was approved by the U.S. Department of Justice. Sadly, it was a merger that was wildly anti-competitive and illegal under the antitrust laws in the United States. And at that point, interestingly, Ticketmaster had about an 80% share of the ticketing market as a standalone company. And that's a monopoly. Anything above 60%, north of 60% market share is a monopoly. So this merger was allowed to proceed, and that supercharged, put on steroids the incentives for the now vertically integrated Live Nation Ticketmaster to squeeze out smaller rivals, smaller ticketing companies, smaller concert promoters, independent venues, so that they could steer all business towards the Live Nation Ticketmaster behemoth. And we have been living with that sad state of affairs since 2010, and fans see it in high ticket fees rather. Artists see it in that they have little to no choice other than to choose Ticketmaster as their primary ticketer. We see it in fear in the marketplace, where smaller competitors are afraid to stand up and talk about Ticketmaster's abusive practices that are designed to reinforce its dominance and its monopoly. And so we have a situation where anybody that's not Ticketmaster, including resellers, are really at the mercy of this modern monopoly. And of course, Jeremiah, 2010 was a very different digital world than the digital world we live in now. And if you think about it, Ticketmaster is both a traditional monopoly, but also modern monopoly. That ticketing platform is a digital platform where user, fan, customer information is transferred and circulated and used by Ticketmaster to steer fans back to its own platform and away from any competing ticketers.
When you and I have talked in the past about different antitrust policy as it applies to different industries, as it applies to different situations and companies, whether we're talking about tech or whether we're talking about pharmaceuticals or whatever the case may be, there's normally a degree of nuance where I'll ask you for some, what is this? And you'll give me some frustratingly nuanced answer that doesn't really go, all the way in one direction or the other. But here it seems like you're pretty much saying, well, Ticketmaster is a monopoly and they are abusive, and that's just the whole story. Is it pretty much just that simple?
It is that simple. It is hands down a monopoly situation. We have evidence. And this is big. We have hard evidence of the higher ticket fees and the lower quality and the breakdown of the Ticketmaster platform because it has no incentive to improve its technology or innovate its platform. It is just a straight up case of what a monopoly is and what the harms from monopoly are for consumers and for smaller businesses and for artists. And it is amazing to me that our antitrust enforcers in the U.S., and this would be the U.S. Department of Justice, which handled this case from the beginning, have not yet taken action to bust up the Ticketmaster monopoly.
It's funny because, I recognize this is not the most important issue in the world. It's not even the most important issue in antitrust. It's this kind of niche thing. But it is a really fascinating example of how much time, and this is what I always think about with antitrust, how much time we spend talking about like big tech companies and how little time it seems like we go after things that are much clearer, much more like in-your-face abusive practices, smaller industries perhaps, but I don't know. It's worth talking about. And you mentioned there antitrust enforcement. I want to ask, in terms of the realistic pathways here to start fixing this problem, if it's pretty straightforward, if the problem is just very bare bones, dead obvious in front of us, is it more likely or is it more appropriate, and answer however you'd like, that we fix this problem by simply poking the FTC with a stick until they actually, do something about this? Or is this going to require legislative approaches that we're going to need to actually get Congress to pass something, or I don't know if this is a state by state issue. I guess just put up simply, is this something that requires the executive branch to act or legislation?
Well, I think the answer is both. Big problems require big solutions, and big solutions in the world of promoting competition for the benefit of workers and consumers is often using multiple prongs of the policy toolkit, and that would include both an antitrust enforcement action, but also legislation. But Jeremiah, I want to back up just one sec here, because you said something that I think is vitally important for people to think about when they read and they talk about monopolies and the harm from monopolies in the U.S. economy and elsewhere. And that's this. So we have antitrust enforcers who right now in the Biden administration who really committed to being way more aggressive on antitrust. And they are. In fact, I'm coming out with a piece very shortly, sort of measuring that effect of the Biden administration strategy. But we take the FTC's case, for example, against Amazon as, the e-commerce marketplace. That case, if you thought sort of jumped to the end game, which is, okay, well, let's say the FTC wins their case against Amazon as a dominant player in e-commerce. What would the solution to that be? Well, the solution could well be to dismantle or take away the Amazon Prime program for consumers. That's one option. Okay. Let's go out and just hypothetically ask just some consumer off the street, hey, what would you prefer to see? Would you prefer to see a monopoly case against Amazon that might result in you losing your Amazon Prime conveniences? Or would you rather see an antitrust case against TicketMaster that, by the way, would prevent you from paying monopoly ticket fees that can sometimes double the price of your ticket to see Taylor Swift or anybody else for that matter? If you ask consumers what they would prefer and how they would prefer public resources be directed towards enforcement, you tell me what the answer to that is going to be. And that says a lot right now about how our enforcers are allocating resources, a lot of intensity on the digital sector. And then we have all these other really troubling monopoly and market power problems lying around in other sectors that hit consumers in their pocketbooks and hit workers in their paychecks. So I think that's sort of the existential question that a lot of us are asking right now. So let's go off for a sec. I really wanted to get that in, Jeremiah, because I think it's an important messaging.
I mean, I'm in full agreement there in terms of, I think the FTC under Lina Khan has had kind of a frustrating set of priorities, if I was going to phrase it very neutrally.
Right.
That I don't think that – I think they're ignoring some obvious things while chasing down some politically juicy topics that are not actually the best ones to be chasing. But
yes.
We've talked about that at length on the podcast before.
Yeah.
With regards to Ticketmaster, it does seem like, this pretty textbook case of monopoly power and abuse of monopoly power and harms from monopoly power. You talked about the higher fees that people pay. The Ticketmaster charges quite high fees, and that they frequently have breakdowns in service that lead to poor service. And it's all just very textbook stuff. What legislative approaches are people talking about? Because I know that there are some bills being proposed at different levels of government.
Yes. So a two-pronged approach, strong antitrust enforcement, which we await in the form of a new monopolization case against Ticketmaster, and then legislative proposals. So you really need both to tackle this big problem. And the legislative proposals unpack in a couple of different ways. One is we have proposals at the federal level, and we have proposals at the state level. And at the federal level and the state level, for that matter, they're really unpacking again into two prongs. One is to prevent or make illegal any efforts to by Ticketmaster or anybody for that matter to force venues to take Ticketmaster as their exclusive ticketing platform. So that's what we call an exclusive contract. And people might say, well, that doesn't sound so bad to me. But when you have a monopolist forcing exclusive contracts on venues, saying, for example, that leads to a direct squeezing out of any rival or competing resellers getting access to that venue to provide competitive services. And so one bill in Congress, Unlock Ticketing Markets, does exactly that. It prevents exclusive contracts between ticketers and venues. So that's one prong.
This is a pessimistic thing to even ask, but I have to ask because I actually don't know. Like, TicketMaster is such a almost universal thing. Is there even a major competitor to Ticketmaster that could like step in and win contracts instead of them? Like, who else is there?
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly the effect that you would want to see as a result of preventing exclusive contracts. So, there are secondary ticketers. We've got StubHub, Vivid Seats, SeatGeek. There are some smaller ticketers, AXS, for example. All of these smaller ticketers are like hovering around on the fringe of the market, trying to get in. They're trying to get access to these venues to be their ticketer and to say, hey, I can provide you with better, more innovative ticketing services, higher quality ticketing services than creaky old monopoly Ticketmaster. But these exclusive contracts are preventing that, because as soon as a venue, for example, signs a contract with Ticketmaster, they will not consider any other ticketing options. So that is an enormous, cannot overstate this, an enormous impediment to spurring competition in these markets. And what we're seeing now, Jeremiah, is, we used to say, okay, well, there's this primary ticketing market, first sale tickets. Now there are these secondary resale markets, and they were very separate. Now they've really blended into one. So Ticketmaster is both primary and secondary. SeatGeek has attempted, for example, to get into primary. And so ticketing, and, we'll see what happens as we move forward. But getting access to those venues to be the ticketing platform of choice, because you are better at it, because you are competitive and more innovative and provide a better ticketing platform, is really key. And preventing those exclusive contracts is the first step in going down that road. The second type of legislation we see both at federal and state levels is sort of ticketing transparency, right? And that is to sort of level the playing field, to give consumers access and information about how they're buying their tickets, how they can use their tickets. Is the ticket a license? Is it a right to, say, occupy a seat? To sort of open up and shine a light on the whole ticketing process. Some of this is very pro-consumer, ensuring ticket transferability, for example, and other devices that really prevent the harmful practices like ticket holdbacks, slow ticketing, busted tickets that Ticketmaster has used to really debilitate the secondary market. These bills go after those types of practices that would improve ticketing transparency and transferability, to better ventilate the ticketing market. So that's another prong that we see in parallel with these prohibitions on exclusive contracts between ticketers and venues.
One of the interesting little nuances that you mentioned there is the difference between the primary ticket market and the secondary market. And I think this is something that also frustrates people, but I wonder if it's not kind of a different problem or kind of adjacent, but not the same thing. Obviously, the primary market is when the ticket is first being sold. The venue has tickets either to some sporting event or a concert or whatever the case may be, and they sell those tickets initially. And then the secondary market is when you can pop up on, I can go sell a ticket that I have on SeatGeek or some third-party site, and you can buy the ticket from me. I guess anything that would just not be that initial first sale counts as the secondary market. And I think a lot of people get frustrated when they see like the high fees from Ticketmaster or something like that. But they also get frustrated by scalping. You'll hear people who are, very frustrated because they couldn't get the initial tickets to Taylor Swift or whatever, which might cost $400. And now when they try to buy it on the secondary market, it's $3,000.
Mm-hmm.
How does this relate to what we're talking about here? Is it basically just a separate thing, or do you find them to be related at all?
Yes, they are related. They are related, but they are actually separate from the perspective of how you build public policy to address them. So let me explain that, because there's a little bit of nuance in there. The source of the problem in the ticketing industry, always, all roads lead to Ticketmaster as a monopolist, as the source of literally all problems in the ticketing industry. Because Ticketmaster has that kind of market power and the ability to force venues into taking Ticketmaster as their ticketing platform, they can exercise that market power by setting exorbitantly high ticket fees. So the ticket fees start with Ticketmaster because they have the market power to jack up those fees on top of the face value of the ticket. Now, the face value of the ticket is a different story. That is set by the artist in conjunction with other participants in the supply chain. It's the ticket fees where we see the market power. So that is the source of the monopoly problem. If you bust the monopoly, I guarantee you, we would get more competition, head-to-head competition in ticketing, and those ticket fees would go down. Just like we see low ticket fees in Europe, where there's way more competition there. So increasing transferability, increasing transparency, giving consumers a better view of what's going on in the ticketing and the resale process will spur some of that competition. What Ticketmaster has done is really pursued a campaign to denigrate the secondary or the resale market, to brand them as scalpers, right? And to brand them as deceptive and dishonest, and to rip off fans and the like. And that has been to some extent effective in shaping state legislative proposals, for example, that would cap the price of tickets on the secondary market at the face value, and that would cap fees in the secondary market at a very, very low percentage. And so we're in a situation right now, a very difficult situation actually, with some of this legislation that actually would debilitate the resale market, which is exactly what Ticketmaster would like. So they can steer everybody back to the Ticketmaster platform. That would debilitate the market in a way that there would be prices would be capped at face value, and secondary ticket market fees would be capped at a certain value. Jeremiah, the net effect of those legislative proposals basically would be to hand Ticketmaster way more market power than it even already has, but they would effectively shut down the resale market. And so now's the point where you say to me, okay, Diana, why do we need resale markets? Why are they important, and how can they function efficiently in the ticketing sector? And I think it's important for people to understand that resale markets can be a great thing. We have resale markets all over the place. We have them in primary metals. We have them in in flea markets in our towns. They're on the weekend, where people go and buy and sell in a secondary market. What that does, at least in ticketing, is it matches up more fans who want to get access to events with more artists. And that ultimately boosts demand for live events, whether it's sporting or music or whatever. But you got to have a well-functioning resale market, not one that is hamstrung and debilitated by legislation that Ticketmaster has supported and backed that would hamper the ability of resellers to actually participate in a well-functioning market. So it's really a very, it sounds complex, but it's pretty clear that Ticketmaster has had its hands in shaping some of these state and federal proposals that would really limit the ability of the resale market to function.
I think it's actually kind of a genius strategy on the part of Ticketmaster. Even if I think it's not, the correct public policy choice, it's a great strategy for them to have completely monopolized the primary market and then shift everyone's anger over to the secondary market and say, look at that, just blame those people. And to some extent, I think it works. But, this is the New Liberal podcast. We call ourselves neoliberals sometimes. So, in terms of markets, you're not going to get much argument from me that markets are important. And the scalping argument is always interesting. I understand why people get angry at scalpers, because obviously they've lost out. Like, the scalper is a middleman who's sitting between you and the ticket you want. But at the same time, the root cause of, why is a scalper able to jack up the price for some event? Well, it's because there's not enough tickets and there's too many people who want them. And if the artist is releasing them for a very low price, if let's say Taylor Swift decides to price her tickets for, her Sydney, Australia leg of her tour at $50 each. And she could do this just because she loves the people of Sydney and she wants to give them a great deal. But at $50, the entire population of Australia is going to try to get those tickets. And there's not going to be enough people. So how do you allocate those tickets? You could just do it first come, first serve, who's willing to wait in line the longest. But what we traditionally do, right, is we do that by who's willing to pay the most. And so people are going to resell those. And it is kind of an odd thing to say, well, tickets might be this unique market where you can't resell what you've bought. You can buy a car and resell it whenever you want. As a used car, you can buy your house and resell it. You can, buy a piece of furniture and resell it. But tickets are this, sacrosanct thing that can never be resold for profit. Do you kind of have a sense of why people get that feeling, why they have that anger specifically about tickets, where they wouldn't have that anger about other things?
Yeah, I think I think live events are this might sound a bit odd, but I actually genuinely believe this. I think live events are really a fundamental part of our culture and even our sort of our democratic society. The ability to freely choose and attend a live event, to hear people speak or advocate, to hear music, to see sports teams compete, is really part of an open society and culture. It gives people great satisfaction and pleasure and happiness to take a break from their lives and to go and see their favorite artists and teams, to have that sense of community around a fan base for a particular artist. And we saw this coming out of the pandemic, Jeremiah. People couldn't go out. They couldn't go to concerts. And they were, everyone was stuck at home for 2 years. And that really took it out of people that they couldn't go out and enjoy music and sporting events and community with each other. So what I'm saying is it's a very important market. It's not an optional market. It's not a luxury market. Or a fun, sort of a entertainment. It is entertainment, obviously, but it's a very important market to people, and fans deserve to be able to attend events at fair prices, either by buying tickets on the primary market or the secondary market. And artists deserve to get access to their fans. And so, back to your really good question. About getting access, both on the artist side and the fan side, Ticketmaster is, again, responsible for limiting access. And one way they do that is to engage in what we call ticket holdbacks. And this goes directly to the secondary market. How people view the secondary markets. And again, Ticketmaster is nurturing a negative view of the secondary markets, that they're all scalpers, for example. When Ticketmaster engages in holdbacks, they are holding back enormous percentages of ticket inventory to create false scarcity. And so when we have it on sale for an event, there's going to be an enormous holdback, which nobody knows the magnitude of, because they're not required to disclose that. So when you have scarcity, just like you pointed out, Jeremiah, prices will go up. And so prices will go up on the secondary market as those limited tickets make their way into the secondary market. And so then Ticketmaster can say, oh, look, all those secondary, those resellers, they're scalping tickets. But the source of the problem is Ticketmaster's own policy to engage in holdbacks and to make sure that fans have a hard time purchasing and using tickets in the secondary market. Things like, for example, slow ticketing, where they don't get their tickets till the very last minute through the resale platform, which is not the reseller's fault. It's the release of the tickets from Ticketmaster. Things like busted tickets. You go to the event and they're like, we can't let you in. This is not it's not the right barcode because the barcode revolves constantly and you have to use Ticketmaster's app to get the barcode. All of this is designed to hamstring the secondary market and then point the finger and say, ticket prices are so high and fees are so high in the secondary market that these are all a bunch of scalpers. And so, reeling back to the legislation, the legislative proposals, any proposals that hand Ticketmaster more power to manipulate or to limit the secondary market are not good for consumers and they're not good for artists.
So we've spent a lot of time here talking about Ticketmaster and the ways in which kind of they're abusing their market power, the little tricks they have and the fees they charge and how they're trying to shift the blame onto the secondary market, which would always exist. But if we could, what would an ideal setup look like? If we could kind of just from scratch design our own market and with our own different number of participants and different policies and features, what would we want a competitive ticketing market to look like? We've talked about a few of these things that are in these bills, but, beyond just, let's stop Ticketmaster from demanding exclusive contracts. That's an easy one, but that only exists because Ticketmaster is already a problem. If we had a good competitive market, what would we see?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And I think it links directly to sort of the realities of the political process and how antitrust enforcement actions are selected and how what antitrust remedies look like, for example. And so I'm going to give you two views. One is sort of to pun badly, the nirvana view of what constitutes competition and ticketing, and the other is the more realistic view of what we might actually get at the end of a process resulting from a successful antitrust case. So nirvana in ticketing is to break up Ticketmaster. It is to separate concert promotion, venue management from ticketing. Those two cannot be linked up because they are the source of all the bad incentives for Ticketmaster to steer consumers and artists to their platform for full service, right? Full comprehensive service across the ticketing markets because they control all of them. So if you break off Ticketmaster, you break those bad incentives to engage in anti-competitive practices that limit competition. So that would be step one. And that would essentially be undoing the original merger, right, Jeremiah? From 2010, the merger was allowed to proceed subject to some really weak, ineffective remedies. They violated those remedies. We have evidence of that. Undoing that, undoing the merger would eliminate incentives to engage in these harmful practices. My view, and I've written on this in a commentary on how to bust up Ticketmaster, is we need to go a step further. The step further is to then take Ticketmaster, which still has an enormous market share, and break up Ticketmaster into smaller companies and ventilate that market, get more competition in there, give the resellers the opportunity to expand, to show their stuff with better digital platforms, with better quality service, with more innovation. And it would look, for those of our listeners who are old enough, it would look a lot like the AT&T breakup in the 1980s, which broke up AT&T into 7 smaller companies, the baby bells. Very similar remedy where we would break apart Ticketmaster from Live Nation, and then we would take the extra step of breaking up Ticketmaster to give to inject competition in the market. I guarantee you, with more competition in ticketing, after a breakup of Ticketmaster, we would see fees drop like a rock. Ticketing fees would drop like a rock. So that's nirvana. That's the nirvana picture of how to deal with this monopoly. I think more realistically, and all of this depends on how a case were to proceed through the federal courts that DOJ is expected to bring. It could look very different. It could be a remedy, for example, could be, well, no more exclusive contracts. Nobody in the industry can force a venue into taking Ticketmaster as their ticketing platform. And if they didn't do that, then they would be punished by not getting good shows on good days of the week and that sort of thing. So a prohibition or an injunction, as we say in the legal world, on exclusive contracts would be a quick fix, but it would not approximate a full breakup remedy that I just laid out.
I'm also curious about other practices, like, some people are always angry that, fees are not necessarily properly disclosed. And so you see things like, I think you talked about transparency, that it should be very clear what amount of money is actually going to the ticket and what amount is the fee being charged by the third party. And some people also talk about like all-in pricing, where you can't advertise the price as $100, but then add in a $30 fee at the last minute. And really the all-in price is $130. Is that stuff you worry about, or is it really just, if we take care of the monopoly, all that stuff will work itself out with competition?
Yeah, I think the step one, the root of the problem, the source of the problem, is to take care of the monopoly, just as you've said. And that is through a strong antitrust case, a monopolization case that would build on existing evidence of abusive practices and break apart Ticketmaster from Live Nation, and then break up Ticketmaster into smaller parts. Once that happens, you have a landscape that is much more conducive and friendly to competition. And when you get competition, we always have to remind ourselves of what competition delivers to consumers, is that prices will go down, and I mean fees will go down. Ticket prices, again, are separate. So, the Bruce Springsteens and the Taylor Swifts of the world who are in high demand, yeah, those ticket prices are going to be higher, and fans are willing to pay that. It's the fees that will go down.
And what's interesting about that, by the way, because this is a little bit of a sidebar in terms of the secondary market, and like prices are really high for Taylor Swift. And like you said, the core cause is just that Taylor Swift is really popular.
Right.
But I know someone who is a pretty active reseller, we shall say. And they are pretty much in it just for the profit. They are just, they try to scoop up tickets and resell them for profit. And maybe a lot of people would think this guy is the scum of the earth. This guy is, if I hope he gets hit by a truck, he gets what's coming to him. But that whole phenomenon, it's much more limited than you think. The typical case of somebody reselling a ticket really is just somebody bought a ticket to an event and they can't go anymore. The number of events where you can actually scalp for some huge profit, you can do that, I'm sure, with like World Series tickets or Super Bowl tickets or Taylor Swift tickets. But Taylor Swift is one of maybe 2 or 3 artists you can actually do that with. It's actually a very small number of artists that you can scalp successfully for, because apparently this is something that is widely known in the scalper community or whatever. But over the last decade or whatever, artists have actually gotten better at pricing their tickets appropriately. It's hard, for instance, like Madonna is still touring somehow, but she actually prices her tickets appropriately now. If you buy them primary and try to resell them, you don't actually make much money. And really, like, Taylor Swift is the one place where all the scalpers could make money. But for most other events, most sporting events, most concerts, what I've heard is that you actually, like, there's not much juice left in the secondary market in terms of, profitability there.
Right. Yes, I think that's absolutely true. And yeah, with any issue that's high profile, and where you have a monopolist sort of controlling the narrative in public debates, of course they're going to point the finger to the small number of incidents where there has been abusive practices through, for example, scalping. So I think we have to.
And look, I get it. The never make Swifties angry. Never make Swifties angry. It's a really bad idea. I get why people are mad at scalpers. I tend to not get mad at them as much as other people. I think they have a useful function, but I do get it.
No. And all you have to do is go talk to smaller artists, and you'll get a very, very different flavor of how they struggle with just one choice in the market, TicketMaster, to ticket their shows, and how little of their face value they actually get back after Ticketmaster scrapes off all of the fees that it charges to the artist. So back to one more important thought. Back to your really good question about, what happens with all-in pricing? What is that designed to accomplish? Obviously, all-in pricing, when you see the price up front before you make the purchase decision and you're not worn out and tired clicking through screens online to get to your tickets, online pricing gives consumers a better ability to make choices, right? And it gives them the ability to comparison shop. So, and we have some of that right now in secondary. You can buy tickets on Vivid Seats or StubHub or SeatGeek, and those companies compete hard against one another. And so what all-in pricing would do is give consumers the ability upfront, before they're deep into the online search and buying process, to compare fees across resellers and make the best decision for them. The reason why that is not happening, that the fees are buried at the end, right, is of course because Ticketmaster has this ability to set very, very high fees and to control that ticketing process. So much like when you go and buy an airline ticket, you want to see what all the add-on charges are, on top of your ticket before you actually click purchase. Legislation that promotes all-in pricing provides greater transparency to the consumers before they buy the ticket. If we were to have more competition following a successful antitrust action, that would break off Ticketmaster and then break up Ticketmaster into smaller pieces. As I said, we'd see fees drop, and we would also see companies competing harder to give consumers that important information up front about what their final cost is going to be. I think all of these changes would fall into line very logically and naturally after competition is re-injected into the ticketing markets. But the trick is to get competition re-injected. All of this legislation that promotes transparency and transferability. Some bills are great. Some bills are not great because they hand more market power to Ticketmaster. But all of that legislation, if it is not accompanied by a successful antitrust enforcement action, will not work as well than if we had more competition in ticketing as the result of a breakup.
All right. So we're coming up on time here for the episode. I want to conclude with the final question that we always conclude with. What can people do if they want to learn more? If they want to learn more about the ticketing industry or about some of these bills or just Ticketmaster's monopoly in general, what would you recommend they do in order to keep learning more about this topic?
Yeah, there are a lot of good resources. I would send people first to the Progressive Policy Institute website, where I have several things posted, interviews on CNBC and NPR and others describing this problem, fundamental problem in ticketing. There are some really good websites that support ticketing transparency done the right way in some states and at the federal level. The Ticket Buyer Bill of Rights is a really, really good framework for what we need in legislation to promote transferability and transparency in ticketing. That you can go right to Ticket Buyer Bill of Rights. There are events at local levels. There is an event in Denver, Colorado, for example, tonight to promote good, strong legislation and ticket buyers' rights. So get involved at the local level. Sign petitions, but read them carefully before you do, to support good legislation to promote ticketing and transparency, and follow the federal legislation as well, because all of these pieces of legislation ultimately are going to have to coexist peacefully with one another if they're passed into law. So there's a lot that consumers and fans can do to draw attention to this issue and to really demand action by the Department of Justice to bring this really important case that we have not yet seen.
It'll be interesting to see how this develops. Politically, Joe Biden has made an effort to kind of crack down on what he calls junk fees. And this has been, in the airline industry, in the ticketing industry. These are not the biggest issues in the world, but they are, cash in your pocket if you can regulate them somewhat. And the hope is that this will be, from Biden, good policy and, politically advantageous to him in an election year. I guess we'll just see where it goes. We'll monitor the situation. Diana Moss, I want to thank you one more time for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Jeremiah. Always a pleasure to talk with you.